I'll quickly just encapsulate what we are here discussing. Basically, we're talking about the effectiveness and the efficiency of ICT implementation to the success of open and distance education learning. You know, the pamphlets that all of us got, there was an aim to this session, and I just want to recall you all to the aim of what we're trying to achieve with this session is basically to invite specialists in the field of distance learning for tabling best practices involving ICT implementation. Before I go further, and I know that all of you all who have been attending sessions in the past 2 days have heard these terms over and over again, but I think it is very imperative to reiterate the fact that what we're trying to achieve is essentially the 3 pillars of education, that is expansion, inclusion, and excellence. So one without the other really does not serve our purpose, right? So the MHRD came out with a report for the people in 2009-2010 where they say that they want to improve the enrollment ratio of higher education by 2020, which is the end of the 12th five-year plan, to a very impressive 21%. Right now it is at 12.5%, wherein the most developing countries are at 13%, which is at a higher rate than us, right? The developed economies have an enrollment ratio of 57.7%. So these are numbers that we are working against, and we are even falling short of the developing countries, right? I'm an economics student and I hate the term developing countries. So when I created this presentation, I was very saddened to know that, we're still falling short of even the developing countries, right? Again, then coming to the question of inclusion. Here we are talking about different sections, like we talk about the SC/STs, the OBCs, education to women, minority communities, and also so from Uttarakhand, you said the areas where, penetration is a challenge still for us. So how do we achieve the inclusion that the government wants us to achieve? And the excellence, right? The excellence in improving the quality of education. So we have a pool of very able-bodied, teachers with us today. But are they reaching everybody whom they should reach? And things like that. So this is the context of my presentation. And before moving further, one encouraging number in all this is the fact that the enrollment in higher for distance education is much higher in higher education than in K-12 sections. So we have an enrollment of total of 15% currently, which is a good number to start with, right? Okay. The previous slides is the current scenario. Okay, we know where we want to go. And now the next few slides I'll focus on how we can possibly get there. We believe that execution is the key to any of this, as with everything else in life. Now, how do we achieve the expansion and inclusion that we're talking about? We truly believe that PC and internet penetration has to tread the path that mobile phones have tread in this country. Like you said, sir, you are able to use SMSs, without even any more investment than what you can afford to right now, simply because mobile phones have tread the path. So really, essentially, we need that PC and internet penetration to set the groundwork. And also policy framework and legislation. So this is again, Professor Srivatsan has spoken about this. But what essentially I'm talking about here is more of job-oriented courses that is driven by the industry. So, you have your degrees and your, postgraduate programs coming up. But I think we need to start introducing programs that are driven by the market, mainly to incentivize the youth to take up these programs. So, talking about, I know that we have worked with IGNOU on developing a program for BPO. So that again incentivizes the youth because they know that while they enroll for the program, there is a job guarantee or a skill guarantee at the end of it. And then again, the speakers before me have touched upon this topic where we speak about teacher and student literacy, right? At the end of the day, unless we have healthy adoptions of these technologies, they are just mere vanilla implementations which are not going to ensure the learning outcomes that we deserve. While the previous slide really talks about what we believe that the government has to take initiatives, the next few slides that I'm going to talk about is what we as the industry can guarantee to help give that impetus. The critical success factors for all stakeholders. So what I've done in this slide is identified the 3 stakeholders in that learning process that we have currently. One is the faculty, right? For the faculty, what does he or she need today currently in terms of technology or e-learning or systems is the flexibility. right? The flexibility to manage his or her instructor-led sessions, the flexibility to manage online resources. There is a body of material which we cannot afford to ignore, right? It's all good to develop flashy e-learning content, but at the end of the day, there is legacy material which cannot be compromised upon. So how do we streamline that into their current curriculum using the e-learning portals? Then we have the support services, and all this really filters down to the fact that then they have time for more teaching and research, and that is essentially what Professor Srivatsan is also talking about. Then we come to the next stakeholder, which is the administration. This is essentially the administration of the college, of the authorities and things like that. They are more worried about scalability and robustness. So is my system, is it going to be relevant in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time? Is it going to scale up effectively? The customizability to different needs of the market. Value for money definitely is a concern on all our minds because you don't want to blindly invest into systems that don't perform for you. Integration with other systems because you have other technologies like your ERP, like your SMS gateways and things like that. And on-demand information. So is this program effective? If it is effective, do I scale up, in terms of enrollments and things like that for future policy decisions? Then coming to the biggest stakeholder, I would say, is the learner himself, right? This person needs the ease of use. In the sense that if I want to support anytime, anywhere learning, I better give them anytime, anywhere learning. At that point, if bandwidth fails me, if my server crashes, things like that, the adoption again is going to dip. Then the accessibility to course content, in the mode that he best recognizes, so social networking sites, mobile phones and things like that. And at the end of the day, improve learning outcomes. So if I come away with a program without a skill, then really all my efforts in the past 2 or 3 years, I have nothing to talk about at the end of the day. So these are the critical success factors for the 3 stakeholders within the system. I'd just like to draw your attention to the next slide, and this is a framework that ECHOL as an organization has very successfully implemented in the past 3 years. This is our learning delivery framework, and we believe that this framework will help us achieve the excellence that all of us are aspiring to achieve, right? If you notice that the key word there then that I would like to highlight is blended learning. Though we are a learning solutions organization, we are a technology company, but we believe that unless we have that teacher intervention, no learning can be complete and definitive at that, right? So personally, I wouldn't want to consult a doctor who's got his degree purely through e-learning, right? So I wouldn't put my money on that. So essentially what we're talking about in the first component is your learning delivery or learning mode that the user and the teacher would go through. We have 3 components here. One is the online learning, that is your instructional material. So how does one access the instructional material? Today, given technology, given internet, there are multiple modes of doing that. So we have web-based courses, video lectures, digital libraries, and self-assessments. This component essentially follows the show me, try me, and test me model of learning. So the first aspect of online learning is essentially basically instructions, that is the show me. Then we come to virtual labs. So when it comes to teaching of engineering courses and things like that, you can create programming labs. When it comes to teaching of language, you can create speaking labs. So where the student has an opportunity to try out what he has basically learned in the previous mode. And the third component is where we believe is the power of this delivery is because it is learner-centric. With the use of technologies like virtual classroom, teachers can collaborate, do some amount of mentoring, do some amount of refresher sessions. And not only that, just because we belong to 2 states, 2 learners shouldn't miss out on learning from each other's experiences. So with technologies like virtual classroom, you can bring about the component of social learning and collaborative learning as well. One thing I'd like to highlight here, and I think Sir from Uttarakhand spoke about the help desk or the call center, right? What we did with our framework is we went one step further and we set up a learner desk, which is not a one-way communication. We had learning mentors calling up students and telling them that, hey, last week your access has dipped. You have spent a lesser number of hours last week than you did the previous weeks. Do you have a problem? Do you require a refresher session? Do you want me to schedule, a lecture with some faculty? Things like that. So this really turned around the rates of adoption for that particular initiative. The second component of our framework is the knowledge assurance component, because we believe that any activity you do, if it does not result in a very tangible learning outcome, it is a void activity at the end of the day. So how does one go about achieving the knowledge? Either through assessments or industry certified courses and assessments at the end of the day. The assessment design and component is a very important part in achieving those learning outcomes, because unless your assessment is not very healthily designed, it is not going to speak to you in the manner in which it is useful for you, right? So it is not, to give you a very simple and a very scaled down example is, I can do a math of 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. The answer is still correct. The question is still valid, but given the place where I am in life, my qualification and what is expected of me from my job, it is not a very impressive answer, correct? So that is where assessment designs and reporting comes into play. And then of course the delivery, we have two modes of delivery where the assessment can reach the student at his desktop, and for higher stake assessments we have proctored, the minds. So we believe that virtual classrooms allow somebody sitting in IGNOU to talk to some other student from some other university today. In that sense, we would be achieving that liberation that Professor Srivatsan has been talking about. Then commissioning of the learning delivery platform and assigning program execution teams, digitizing the content in an effective manner, and of course the program execution as such, making sure that the access is up, the sessions are scheduled and running on time, there are refresher sessions, the helpline and mentoring like I spoke about, where it's not just a one-way communication but a two-way communication essentially, and the assessment criterion, which really does bring to the table the learning outcome that has to be assured to every learner and to every faculty at the end of the day. So this is in brief our framework, which has worked for us and which we believe is key to achieving the excellence that our nation aspires for. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. I think we are going to have a question and answer session, so I'll keep it for that. And if anybody would like to discuss further with me, we are at stall number 35, and these are my coordinates, so please feel free to get in touch with me. I'd love to interact.